I'm Robin Scott on the campus of Oklahoma State University, Oklahoma City, and we are glad to have Pat Reaves discuss for us the subject of grading. Now, grading is one of the important issues in higher education, and so Ms. Reaves comes to us very well qualified. She is an associate professor in the business department, and she is also part of our assessment team, and she is co-chair of the assessment committee on campus, which of course teaches all of us about grading. One of the big differences in our organization from other organizations and other organizations that you have been in is that we do actually have to grade, allow people to pass or not pass our classes, because that is what moves them along to graduation. I'm sure that you remember being graded so that you have a feel for the fact that this has to happen, but she's going to share with us some of the nuts and bolts of grading, how to do it fairly, and especially how to actually guide students in the process of grading. We want to tell them when they can improve, but we really want to be able to encourage them when they are doing it correctly. She is going to give us a sense of the tools that we use in higher education in grading, but let me just give you a number for our help desk. Here at the campus, if you have any needs with technology, you should call the help desk at 945-6767. You'll reach someone in our information services department, and they can help you with any kind of technical question that you have about grading. You can also ask your supervisor about setting up your gradebook, but Pat Reaves is going to give you an idea about what that looks like and even really questions that you should be asking. So in any case, I think she will give great pointers in terms of encouraging your students through grading and how to do it fairly.
As instructors, our overall goal is for students to learn, and grades are one of the tools that we can use to help our students learn, to measure the student learning that happens in our courses. So this presentation, I want to talk about three different things. First thing is why we use grades. So why do we grade? I'll talk about some tools we have for assigning grades. I'll particularly talk about how you can use a rubric to do that, to make your grading of more complex, more subjective items more objective, to facilitate that process. And then the last thing we'll talk about is recording grades, particularly using the online gradebook and Desire to Learn to do that. So first off, why we grade. Again, our goal is to help students learn, and we want to use grades as a tool to do that. So they're a method of providing feedback to our students. Students need to know whether they're learning, whether they're meeting the standards, and grades allow them to do that. Grades are a way of motivating students. Students want to make good grades for the most part. And if they know what kind of grade they're making, then they'll be motivated either to keep up the good work or to work harder and work differently. And finally, grades document student performance so that everybody who's here, or most everybody who's here, wants to get a degree. And they need to be making satisfactory progress in their courses towards that degree, and grades are a way of documenting that progress. So we have to record grades, and for some very good reasons in terms of helping our students learn. So as instructors, we strive to maintain a grading system that's fair and consistent. Both students and instructors benefit if we communicate a clear, well-defined system of grading. We want to avoid the student question, why did you give me that grade? By clearly outlining in advance how a student earns his or her grade. So some guidelines for doing this. First thing is to clearly communicate your grading policies. At the beginning of the semester, explain to the class what the basis for grades are, what the meaning of grades are, and the procedures that you use in grading. You want your course syllabus to outline that grading policy. It should indicate how the assignments, tests, and any other classwork will contribute toward the course grade, so students know where their grade is coming from. Also, you want to grade on the student's mastery of the knowledge and skills. Your evaluation should primarily be on academic performance. If you include things like attendance and classroom participation in grading, make sure that your grading policy reflects those, so that that policy that's included in the syllabus should reflect the importance of attendance and the importance of participation in their grade. Finally, keep students informed about their progress throughout the semester. Grades shouldn't be a surprise at the end of the course. And the gradebook in the online classroom that we're going to talk about in a little while will help you do that, so that students will know what their grade is. They can see how each assignment contributes to their overall course grade. If you do that, then you don't have the problem of somebody coming in and saying, I thought I was doing great. How could I possibly fail this class? So, we got our policies in hand. How do we assign these grades? Some things are easy to grade. It's easy to grade any kind of objective item. You know, sometimes we have an exam, it's got true-false questions. We have an exam that's got multiple choice questions. Those kinds of things have right and wrong answers. Arithmetic problems, they have right and wrong answers. 2 plus 2 will always equal 4. So we can always grade those things. Easy enough, nobody has a problem with that. It's some of the more subjective items where students are doing more original work that we have trouble with. So the student presentation, an essay question, writing a paper, those kinds of student performance items are difficult to grade. Sometimes the grading for those can seem arbitrary. If you think back when you were in school, you can probably remember an instructor that you thought assigned grades arbitrarily. So how did you feel when you got a grade from that instructor? I'm guessing it wasn't particularly a rewarding experience that was the highlight of your educational experience. A good grade doesn't mean anything if you think it's arbitrary, and a bad grade just makes you mad. It doesn't help. So we want to find a way to make that grading more objective. We want a fair and consistent grading system. So here's a tool for being more objective in grading those more complex items, that essay question, the presentation, even things like an art project, things that seem totally subjective. We can assign some criteria and do that evaluation in a way that's consistent and fair. That's our goal. This is a template for a rubric, and a rubric is just a table of scoring criteria. If you don't like jargon, you can call it a table of scoring criteria. We'll call it a rubric, simpler. It defines the characteristics of student work for specific quality levels. So in this rubric, we've got 3 quality levels. It's above, usually we'd say that's above expectations, it meets expectations, it's below expectations. And we've got the criteria. There are 3 levels, 3 criteria that are in this particular table. We would then put in the middle here the definition of what above expectations is for criteria A. So that all seems very abstract, right? Let's think about it in a more specific example. We got an apple pie. You got to imagine yourself. You got a whole table full of apple pies, and your job is to grade them. That sounds like a nice job. I could go for that. How will you assign the grades? What are the criteria that makes one pie better than the other? What makes the pie good? What makes an exceptional pie? If somebody else was grading the pies, would they assign the same grades? Probably not if you don't have any kind of specific criteria for assigning that. I might decide that, you know, this pie up here, very lovingly presented with the American flag, is the most beautiful pie out there, and so it's the best. You might pick a different one because it's totally subjective. So here we have a nice rubric for an apple pie. And I'm not going to read all the little details to you, but you can see we've got 3 levels of performance: below expectations, meets expectations, above expectations, and we've got 4 criteria. So if we need to grade this apple pie, if we need to grade an apple pie, we've got some criteria for doing that. Here's our criteria. I can taste this pie, I can look at this pie and see where it fits on this rubric. A couple of examples. Pie number one. Pie number one, we look at pie number one and determine that, well, mostly the recipe's been followed, the proportions are pretty good, so it's in this meets expectation column. The apples are beautifully cut, all very uniformly cut and prepared for even baking, so that's above expectation. Crust isn't so good, it's not really light and flaky, so that's below. And it's not baked evenly. Some parts are, more done than others. It probably came out of my oven and the crust is burned. In this case, you can see that on some criteria, the pie is above expectation, some criteria it meets expectations, and some criteria it's below expectations. The chances of another evaluator getting something close to that or the similar rating are pretty high because we've defined some objective criteria. Pie number two, it's different. So we've got a couple of these that are above expectation and a couple that meet expectation. So it's easy to use this rubric and say, well, okay, here's one pie that meets the criteria for the assignment and exceeds it in some ways, and the other one that doesn't meet it in some ways. If we want to assign points, so now we need a grade. We assign points, and we just take this rubric and we've added some numerical values. So I've said below expectations is 1 point, meets expectations is 2 points, above expectations is 3 points, and you'll note this is pie number two. So pie number two, we sum all that down, gets a total of 10. If you actually add this up, you'll see that there are 12 possible points on this assignment, and I can easily record this number. Now I can go back and numerically compare all the pies that are submitted in relationship to this assignment. Obviously, this is not, unless you're teaching a culinary arts class, going to be a relevant rubric, but there are lots of rubrics out there that are available, and in many cases, your instructor will provide those rubrics to you. Your textbook may have rubrics available included in the instructor materials, and there's certainly lots of example rubrics available on the internet that you can look at and adapt for specific purposes. If you want to learn more about rubrics, the OSU Student Learning website has resources there, and the apple pie example actually comes from this excellent tutorial that's on the University of Colorado Denver website, and you see the URL there for that. So now that we've got grades, we need to record those grades. And some of you might recognize this old-fashioned gradebook. Occasionally, there are some of us around who might have recorded grades in an old-fashioned gradebook like this. They're gone. No more. You might be one of those people who kind of likes putting things in little grids. Some of us will confess to that. Those are gone. They're replaced by this online classroom gradebook, the electronic gradebook. There are some serious advantages to the online gradebook. One of the major advantages is that it allows students to track their progress through the semester so that a student can sign in, they can look at their grade, they know what they're making. Every class at OSU-Oklahoma City has an online section available in the Desire to Learn learning management system. So you can use this gradebook. You're encouraged to use this gradebook to record your grades and to make those grades available to students. I'm going to flip over on this computer now, and we're going to look at the process of using the online gradebook. Now we're in the online classroom, and this is a course that I've taught. And so we're going to look at the gradebook feature in Desire to Learn. And from this main page, if you just go to the grade section, click on the grade section, then that takes us into the gradebook, the main screen, which is the Intergrades screen for the gradebook. This is the place you'll do most of your work. I want to give you just a little overview of some of the other pages, and then we'll come back to this one. This page gives you a list of all the students, the grade items, the scores that have been entered. The other grades over here under this, in this menu, the Manage Grades area, mostly you're going to work with a gradebook that's already been set up for you. This is where you would enter new grade items. So if you needed to enter a new grade item, you would do that here. This is where all of those are set up and identify the points that are available for a particular grade item. The grade setting area, again, this is something that you probably, for the most part, won't need to do anything about, won't need to change, except for this first page, which is the personal display options. This personal display options only affects how you see your gradebook, so it gives you the ability to change things a little bit so you can see things in a way that just is convenient for the way you work. So let's go back to entering grades, because that's where you're going to do most of your work. We have a list of the students and a list of all the grade items. You'll note these grades are entered already. We can enter grades for a particular item. We can enter grades by student, either way. So on entering grades by item, we click on that little ruler icon, takes us into a screen that shows us a list of all the students in the class and a blank where we can enter the grade. So we're going to enter a grade here for Scott on this assignment, the study questions for lesson 1. Scott's done, well, Scott hasn't done well. So Scott's only made 10 out of 20 on this assignment. Well, just that number doesn't give Scott much information, does it? So I want to tell him something about that. And the comments allows me to do that. Any comment that I enter in this area that says comments for users will be visible to the student when they check their grades. So I've given Scott here some advice. You need to study the second part of the chapter, come see me with your questions. And when he looks at his grade and he sees that he's only made 50% on this assignment, 10 out of 20, then he will have gotten some information from me about that grade and know what to do with it. If I've graded all these assignments, I would continue through and post all of those. I can do those one at a time. You know, if Scott's the only one I've graded, then I can grade his and come back to everybody else's. One of the things you want to be sure of, I know this because I've done it badly too many times, be sure you click Save. It doesn't record it automatically. And then it prompts you, are you sure you want to? Yes, I'm sure I want to. If you skip either of those steps, the work that you've put in will not be there. So if you've got a class of 25 or 30 people and you've just entered all those grades, if you skip that step of save, you're going to be re-entering all those grades. So now I can see these grades are entered, and if I go back to the user list, I can review that and I'll see that here's the grade that I just entered on that overall user list. The other approach to entering grades is to enter it by the individual user. And I do that by selecting the user. That'll bring me up a list of all the grade items for this user. So here I'm looking at a student and all the grade items that have been entered for this student. And I can see what comments have been entered in the past and what grade items need to be entered. The other thing you can do with individual students, and this is important, sometimes you want to know how this looks to your student. This preview button will give you an idea of how it looks for your student. I've found that it doesn't always reflect exactly the way the student sees it for some reason, but this will give you an idea of what your student sees. You note here on this discussion, even though they don't have a grade, there's a comment. That's because it's an overall comment that I've entered on the grade item so that every student will see that particular comment, because that helps you when you have to type the same comment over and over and over. Like this particular one says to receive all 15 points, you must make at least 2 posts to the discussion because I've entered that one about 20 times before I figured out I could do it for everyone at the same time. So we've entered grades. We're going to assume that we've filled all these out for the whole semester now. So fast forward to the end of the semester. and it's time to do grades. The online classroom will calculate the final grade. You can use it to calculate the final grade. This final grades column is available either, in this case I've configured it to be at the front of the gradebook, or it will be at the end of your gradebook. It gives you the ability to, you go into that, you can calculate the grade for each of the students using this. And if you have, it's a pretty simple process. Calculate those grades, and this is showing me that every grade that's in the class is being included in that. And yes, it will. In this case, there are no grades, just a few grades in here, so my students have done particularly poorly. Then I need to release those grades so that students can see them. And this Release All button will do that. When I do this, now the student can view their grade, view their final grade. So at the end of the semester, when you need to turn your grades in, you're just going to export this into an Excel spreadsheet. And on our user list, there's the Export Grades item on the screen. That'll export it to an Excel spreadsheet. There's some options here, and you can get some help in determining those. I usually just take what's there. Gets me a file that I can open in Excel, and you can modify as you want to in Excel. So we've talked about three things. Fair and consistent grades are a learning tool. They're an important learning tool. We can use rubrics as a method of assigning objective grades to complex student work. And the gradebook in Desire to Learn allows you to record grades and allows students to view those grades and follow their progress online.